Hello, everyone. Welcome to Osquery office hours. Today is August 16th. I see some new faces. Always a pleasure. So, welcome. First section, announcements and highlights. We cut 5.5, so it's currently a pre-release. I haven't tested it. We'll probably talk about it later. Any other announcements or highlights from folks? If not, next section is sort of an open section of office hours. If anyone's got an item they just want to bring up, they didn't feel comfortable adding it to the agenda, they've got a question, now's a great time to bring it up. Okay, moving on to agenda items. First item people wrote down was Osquery 5.5. Still need to change log. I can try and make one today maybe. And I haven't tested it yet. Has anyone else tested it?
Haven't tested it yet, but planning to push it out to our Edge channel, which mostly means the internal fleet today. And then we have both some automated tests we can do, and we'll be doing a bit of manual testing in our dog fooding environment.
I'll probably push it to Collide's beta fleet this week as well.
The one thing about automated testing is the new functionality will need to be exercised as well, right? macOS Unified Logs table. I don't know if everyone's automated testing involves just the functionality you've got.
Mostly I would say our automated testing mostly involves making sure that we can package and deploy it successfully. It'll still connect up to a fleet server, that kind of thing. We don't have any automated testing for tables beyond what exists in Osquery itself. But then we can also, once we get those things deployed in our dog fooding instance, we can start like running some live queries against the new tables and that kind of thing.
Well, it's still a nice release, so go team. Anyone want to say anything else about 5.5? If not, 5.6. I assume, Mike, you put this there, suggesting we push from September 1 to September 15th?
Yeah.
I'm going to counter-propose October 1. There's not much that's been merged, and for no good reason. I like releases on the 1st of a month than the 15th.
Yeah, until we get to the end of the year, and then you have January 1 as a hard day to release on.
I mean, okay. I guess we can do the 15th.
It's just a month after this one gets kind of baked. So, yeah, if we think it's going to take another week and a half of testing pre-release to get a release, then well, we'll date it from a month from when it was tagged. I mean, we're trying to stay on the month.
If we want to talk about monthly, we probably want to talk about tagging them on some cadence, be it the 1st of the month or I guess the 15th of the month. I guess I could be sold on the 15th. First just sounded like a 1, but no other reason. I'm not sure we really have a commit rate to make it to be sensible for monthly, as I like look at things, but maybe we do. I don't know. We can keep kind of just trying whatever, I guess. I don't know if it makes sense to fall back to every other month again, or just keep trying monthly. What's your feeling?
Well, my feeling is that you keep the plan as the aspiration, and knowing that it's a soft goal, right?
Okay,
self-imposed.
So it's the 15th, then why not?
All right.
Zach, are you talking to us?
You did. Yes, thank you, everyone. I'm also fine with doing more smaller releases, and I think hopefully Fleet will be contributing more, especially now that we have both Artemis and Charvel working on things from the Fleet side. Um, and um, and even I mean, if there's anything worth releasing, I'm fine with doing it on the monthly cadence, and we can do what limited testing we do on the Fleet side to help get that out. Um, I'm not sure if there's other overhead that folks are concerned about, but I think I'm with Mike on let's be aspirational here. But
Okay.
in either case, I'd prefer consistency over anything. So if we think that we can't do monthly, then I'd rather go to 6 weeks or 2 months.
We can probably keep trying monthly. I think we might just have to work at it and then hammer out the places that we're running into trouble. That'd be my guess. And I think probably the nature of things is always cyclic. So some releases will always have like 30 things in them that are amazing, and other ones will be like 3 doc fixes. Just the nature of the of the cycles. So
I don't know if you see this, but I feel like some customers, they will only adopt the one release older than the newest. So
every commit should be a release then. Everything.
yeah. Sometimes if you want any major functionality changed or tested, you have to release those minor ones as well.
I don't actually hear much concern from customers about the Osquery release schedule, but
you
that's
probably
not to say you don't.
Probably have heard what we've relayed, but we have customers that have workflows that flag anything that has a dependency concern, whether or not that's a real concern. But the more frequent the release, the fewer times that I have to say to somebody, I don't know when that'll ever be patched, which is, not fun to tell them. If we tell them like monthly, so just wait, people can go, I can wait a few weeks.
Let's keep aiming at monthly then. Do people like the 1st or the 15th more?
Just I'll vote mid-month. That's my vote.
Anyone else want to venture a wholly baseless opinion that is just based on like number prettiness?
I buy Mike's reasoning around January 1. I'm not sure if there are other dates throughout the year that where the 15th is more challenging than the 1st, or if there are others where the 1st is tricky. But even just for that, I'm down to go at the 15th.
I think I think the ultimate goal we should aim for is getting GitHub to auto release for us. Like, I think we need to get ourselves out of the loop if we want to keep at a monthly cadence. And that feels doable. So it's just got to suffer with it for a little while and then wear down the sharp edges. So, I'm down for the 15th if we'd rather that. So let's try that.
And I'll say I personally don't have a good understanding of what the sharp edges are. And I think the Fleet team can probably offer some help addressing those if folks can help us understand what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think I probably have the best sense of that. I feel like I should write some tickets or something.
Probably wiki about release process, like how we generate the change log and how we tag it, and
yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a long tail, but that's the nature of it. Anyone want to say anything else about 5.6 or releases in general? If not, Marcus, you raised something about Windows evented tables?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and I just preface this with Marcos came to Fleet with some ideas around ways that Osquery could be improved on Windows using the capabilities in ETW, and we are talking about bringing Marcos on board to address some of these things, and wanted to get a chance for him to discuss that with the core community here, talk about what he's thinking and what we could be doing on Windows. So thank you for joining us, Marcos.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me here and for your time to giving me time during this meeting to present this idea
welcome.
that I have. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to share a deck that I prepared. If that is okay to you. Give me a moment. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so as Zach mentioned, I have this idea of this crazy idea of including more evented tables on the Windows agent of Osquery, mostly as a way to improve the visibility and be able to tackle some of the threat-hunted use cases that I've tried to do with Osquery in the past. So, quick intro about me. So, I've been working on OS internals and native applications for some time now. I'm still quite new to Osquery. I mean, I've been started to use it and see the code quite recently. So bear with me on that and any mistake that I might have made during the presentation. Okay, so why improving the visibility on Windows, and why this is an issue? So I see that this is mostly an issue because of how the threat landscape is evolving around Windows malware in general, and I see that Osquery is really good to provide information on the current state of the endpoint, especially on the Windows side of things, right? But it is not so good at providing, at giving past execution information. So, for example, the best example of that is that if you, on Windows, if you query for a list of process, you might end up probably missing what happened between those two queries. And so I also noticed that people in the past tried to tackle this issue by coupling Osquery with different tools like Sysmon or EDRs or AB products, and even custom tools. So, so an idea that I have to solve this problem was to improve the visibility that Windows have by adding more evented tables. And doing that by using ETW, which is a native tracing functionality present on every Windows versions that don't require any extra setup to get it to work. It just requires talking with the right APIs from the OS. As a very high-level overview, as I mentioned, ETW is a tracing framework available on Windows, and Windows internally has been using it to log events, performance and tracing events on pretty much every component on the OS stack. ETW providers are available on every kernel, OS kernel driver, and on most of the Windows components and Windows services on the user space side of the OS. Well, some of the features of ETW is that you can, I mean, the providers are already there. They are provided by the OS itself, and you just have to deal with some specific aspect of the framework, like setting up the right sessions and listening to those events in real time in order to be able to, perform data analysis and analytics on the data itself. So, any question at this point?
So ETW is something native in Windows?
Yes, exactly.
And this slide says it's been there since Windows 7. Presumably,
Yeah.
it is still in Windows 11.
Yeah, it's available from Windows 11 to Windows XP. Actually, it started to get used more heavily since Windows 7. So you get to see that there were a lot of providers available since then. Sorry.
So on macOS, the macOS endpoint security framework requires additional code signing stuff. I don't know much about Windows. Is there anything analogous, or is this just something that any administrative process can use?
Any regular, I mean, non-administrative and administrative process can use. That depends on the providers that you are actually leasing. There are a set of providers that are only available to LM signing process, which is a special level of timing that Windows
Sorry, say that again.
I think the acronym is ELAM, so something like that, which is basically the signing level that AVs have, for example. So there are a subset of providers that are only available to those type of processes, but those are the minimum. I mean, there are just like a few number of those providers, which are called security W, which are only available to AVs, but the rest of them are available to anyone. So to every process.
I see there's some people answering my question in chat. Would we be interested in the ELAM providers, or is that
just
future?
Speaking from personal experience, we will never get ELAM. It would be like a certification process. We would need to have a commercial anti-malware product that is like reached a certain level of adoption. It's probably about who you know and not what you submit.
I will comment that Microsoft bundles Osquery with some of the products, so we do have some contacts inside Microsoft.
If you know the people that are running those projects, maybe, but there are no open source communities with this membership or approval. It's like strictly commercial vendors that have been approved so far, to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, I mean, having those signing levels will be awesome, because we will have access to a great amount of information. But yeah, it will be a difficult process to achieve. Definitely.
But I think
go ahead, Mike.
The events that you would need that privilege to collect, I think a lot of them are like pre-boot or early boot types of events. So it's not that so Osquery has not traditionally been used to collect that kind of thing anyway.
Yeah, there is one provider that appear on Windows 10, which is the a project that gives you a specific security information that is being used by EDR products, for example, to detect code injection attempts. So there is this provider, which is actually would be quite useful to have. But yeah, I agree that most of the rest of the providers that you can reach with that same level are mostly for voting related stuff. Yeah.
I mean, okay, I'm sold.
Okay.
And you'll see Marcos has some slides about proposed tables and which providers they come from, and
yeah,
I think probably none of these require that level of signing, right?
Exactly, none of these require that level of signing.
Okay, cool.
That's correct. Yeah, so I wanted to start with a few use cases that I think, and this is my personal opinion, will be quite useful to have on the Windows side of Osquery. The first one will be the eventing data for processes. So overall idea here is to just be able to capture the process creation and termination, and along with that, all the context information regarding those events. For example, you will end up having the process ID, the image being used while creating the process. By image, I mean the P file, the actual binary that process was spawned on. Then the command line used during that process creation. And this is all information that came from the kernel itself. so it's not something that can be easily tampered or misused. So there's a high fidelity information coming from there. So I will start with that table. Then a table that give us information on these images being loaded into the process, so not only the binary images, but of the binary itself, but also the DLLs, the modules that were loaded by the process. This will again allow a threat hunter, for example, to track a specific DLL used through an entire fleet, which is going to be quite useful. Then the next one, the file events. So I have different use cases for this one. The idea is to track file writes, file deletions, file renames, just to scope, the amount of things that you can gather from ETW. So I will start with those.
This one, there is an NTFS events table. I don't know if this is different or the same. I just don't know enough Windows.
It's different.
That's fine.
NTFS is file system specific, and one of the reasons why we went that route to implement file integrity monitoring on Windows instead of ETW was related to one of the points I was going to bring up. I wanted to let Marcos give his introduction, but table this for when you're ready. How to enable these events if Osquery is not to change system state, since I think a lot of these need to be turned on in a configuration change. Is that correct?
This can be turned on dynamically just by talking with the APIs. By configuration change, well, what do you mean? Sorry, I didn't quite get that question, that point.
Your system state is changed by Osquery. We would have a longer discussion over whether that's aligned with the design constraints of Osquery. Osquery's objectives are to not change system state and several other things. That has been the handcuffs that have prevented us from simply enabling some things that Windows could collect for us.
But Mike, we do this for, so I don't recall discussion about ETW in the past, but we do effectively change system state to install libaudit rules or BPF hooks, or now endpoint security hooks as well, I think also requires sort of that registration. Is ETW fundamentally different than the libaudit stuff we have?
Knowing the sense that you, for example, for the eBPF, it's actually a bit different, because in eBPF you have to install your own hook in order to retrieve the data that you need. But in this case, the ETW providers are already there. So Windows ships with these providers embedded on different components of the OS. So the only thing that you have to do is to start receiving, let Windows know that you want to receive those events and start collecting the events. And that's it. You don't have to install a hook, or you don't have to install a proof in order to get the events, because the events are already there. They are just being discarded by the OS because no one is listening to the events. So in the case that you start a trace session and you let Windows know that you want to listen to those events, the kernel is going to start giving you that information to your callback, and then you do whatever you want with that data.
So Marcos, doing that wouldn't make them start showing up in the Windows event log or something like that. They would only be sent to the Osquery process.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, Windows 7 logged and use ETW under the hood. So that's ETW is the mechanism that the event log consumes from the OS in order to get the data, get the events information and present it to the end user. So no, the answer is no. It will not show us as it will not add extra events on the event log. There might be some events related to the a new ETW session being open, but I think it's not something that is going to change the system state, in my opinion.
And
Sorry, maybe you just answered it. I was wondering, when you enable one of these channels for ETW, would those events end up also in a log file, like something you can see through the event viewer, or is that like is that separate?
Yeah, you made a good point. So basically, when you talk with the ETW API, you create this ETW session, and on that session you can define how those events you want to be, what is going to be the storage for those events. So you can define there if it's going to be a log file, which is kind of the format that event log use, or you can just let the API to deliver those events in memory in real time. So the events are just going to be sent to your callback running on your listening process, and those are not going to be written anywhere.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to this, first use case is adding visibility for processes, then images that are loaded by those processes. Then there is this idea of capturing specific actions around files which are independent of the file system on which these file actions are being made. So through this, you can get information on, for example, action made on the ISO file format, for example, which is now kind of a common delivery mechanism for phishing attacks, for example. And then, some other file system that might, where these file actions could be made. Then the next one is around, capturing some registry actions. So registry is a big thing on Windows. So you have this database where most of the Windows applications end up writing and reading stuff from. So the idea is to, this is a quite tricky one because we need to be careful on which operations we want to capture because it's it's an area of Windows where you have a lot of actions happening. Let's say, So and this is a point that I want to make, and which I added later on the slide, which are the challenges that I see while implementing a solution like this one. Which one being the performance impact of the solution. That's why I want to start with a set of reduced number of use cases and go from there. Okay, so the next one is around network connections. So in this case, this is the provider that I want to use. Again, it's something that this set of information came from the kernel itself. And the overall idea here is just to track the established, rejected, and disconnected network connections, and the information that came with those events. And the next one is DNS. This is again something which is that will be quite useful for threat hunting purposes, because it will give you an idea if a specific malicious DNS was queried on your fleet of Windows endpoints. And the idea here is just to track that query information by process. And SMB is a protocol which in Windows especially, and domain-based organization, Active Directory organization where the Active Directory is used. SMB is a common mechanism for malware to spread across the network. So you have this thing called SMB name pipes. So, and the idea here is to detect those SMB name pipes creation, basically through a provider called Microsoft Windows SMB client, which is a user space provider, which is embedded on the SMB stack itself on Windows. And that's pretty much it. So I did some research on some other providers that will be interesting to have. I kind of listed over here. So I'm going to share the slides with you guys so that you can check them out later. And I want to say that there are many, many more providers. So one of the things that I wanted to do if this goes on was to build the architecture of this stuff in a way that most of the components can be reused, and the work is mainly around extending the publisher and just adding new subscriber tables for the new evented tables that might appear, might pop up in the future, and have this logic to handle ETW and the different providers to listen, kind of separated and isolated in a common component, so it can be just it can be reduced to reuse and to whenever a new event table, a new provider is going to release. Any question at this point?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Does the consumption of any of this information present normalization challenges or schema differences across versions of Windows? Because I know that with the events, they are captured in some kind of binary format, and they need to be expanded or basically infused with their semantic meaning in order to process or parse. Like we're going to be storing them as another format. So my question is, like, do you think there are challenges in collecting the same event across every supported version of Windows in a normalized way?
I don't think that there is a challenge with that, mostly because, let me actually, so I have this section on the challenges that I see up to this point. I'm still quite new to Osquery, so I'm learning stuff by the day. But what I wanted to do in order to address those issues, so I have this backup slide where I am listing the number of providers and the number of events that you can get from Windows as Windows evolve over time. So I'm mostly going to focus on the what is called the manifest and MOF-based providers, which are providers with a known schema. So you have a non-documented schema to parse the information that came from these providers. So an ETW event basically is composed by two things. You have a fixed header, and then you have a variable payload, let's say. And then on that payload, every provider implements or delivers a different amount of data, different amount of information. So by just looking into the manifest providers, we will know which information we are going to get on that payload, and we are going to be able to parse that data in a expected and known way. So that's what I'm thinking to do in order to tackle that issue. And you're right about ETW. ETW is quite flexible. So there are different type of events which are not documented by Microsoft. Those are called WPP and trace login type of ETW events. And those ones, you have to do some extra logic. You have to do some reversing in order to be able to understand what is coming on that binary block.
So I guess my recommendation would be, you said you wanted to create a common component that you could reuse. There will probably be, I would anticipate a lot of feedback related to that. To assume that that's going to take some time to get merged, and after that it would be quick to add individual tables since they'll just be specific event types. So what I guess we should think about which of these functions or tables to target as the initial proof of concept, or at least not take on the hardest one first. So we've had some false starts along this topic. Is people have been asking for Windows process events since the beginning of Windows support, and how to get those has always been primarily a architectural question, not so much like technical feasibility was always there. You would just get the ETW event, but obviously that there was still a gap there of like, well, how exactly do we get that, and how does that work within Osquery? So that was always the hard part that blocked it. So control expectations. Think about how the minimal viable product can get us get this ball rolling finally, and I would be excited to see it personally.
That's a great tip. Thank you very much for that. I think you're right.
My
we need to find that.
My gut sense looking at this is that it seems like a great thing to add. It feels very in line with the BPF work, with the audit D work, with the endpoint security work. So it seems like it would be a great thing to have. And then I feel like for any individual table, there's a question of, is that data that we want in Osquery? What are the trade-offs? What's the privacy implication of it? What's the normalization of it, right? Because it sounds like, there are hundreds of these, and I don't really want 100 different ETW tables. It just feels messy. So, but obviously a process events table makes a lot of sense. So I just don't know where those lines are, and I don't think I have a rubric for answering.
I think feature parity with the other tables would be probably.
Oh, sure. But I mean, there's a lot more of them, right? Like PowerShell events. Do we want PowerShell events? What does that mean? I don't know. How's that different than process events? So I feel like there are these questions I have of actually, I don't know, PowerShell events. What are PowerShell events that are not process events?
So it's a scripting engine interpreter, right? Same as if you had the ability to collect Python script, instantiations. So one of the things about process eventing is usually you don't have much insight into those managed, those interpreted language runtimes. You can block or you can allow Python generically, but how do you know which Python script you really want to allow? That's one of those whitelisting, blacklisting challenges. So PowerShell events will at least let you log PowerShell as the interpreter launched, but what did it do? What PowerShell events are.
Yeah, the PowerShell events. So that provider, which is I think this one here, that's the name of the provider. So basically, it gives you information on the execution of the PowerShell engine itself. So you will get information as it was mentioned on the different contents of the PowerShell scripts being executed, and you will get that information not only for the PowerShell.exe binary, but also from any other binary on Windows that use the PowerShell libraries, which is where actually the engine is. So, for example, there has been cases of malware implementing their own PowerShell interpreters. That is called a native or managed PowerShell. So you will, by having that visibility, for example, you will get to know if PowerShell managed PowerShell, for example, was executed on your environment, and get an idea of the malicious actions of the script that was executed. So it's kind of it's related to the processes in a way, but it gives you more information on the insights of that process execution, which is tied to the execution of a PowerShell script.
I think it is similar to the PowerShell events table that we have, where you just get one event per call block.
Yes.
Which table?
Yeah. There's a script blocking, the script block table.
We also have a generic, we have events for, we have a table that catches event log events, and in there you can enable as a channel also PowerShell events. Actually, if I recall right, actually there is a subscriber enable PowerShell events. I'm not sure if this one is only for the script you were talking about, but I was wondering. So yeah, we have these Windows event channels and again Windows event log events. This one would be basically the same kind of event, just that they are like the ones I'm talking about right now. They are ending in the event log though, because they are. And so the ones you are instead proposing are the same source. Some of them are the same source, just not necessarily have to end up in the event log.
That's correct. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the source is the same in most of the cases. For example, in the case of the DNS, for example, it's the same thing, the same source. Even Sysmon uses this same EW provider to gather information from the DNS queries. The main difference between this approach and the event log is that the event logs fears that event collection had to be enabled by default on the event log in order to be able to retrieve that data. So you will have to go and actually modify sometimes the event log in order to retrieve that information, to enable that information to be collected. And second thing is that sometimes the event logs, the event log collector logic is omitting and dropping some data. So for example, for some of these things that you get to see on the event log, the data that is coming from, not all the data that is coming from the EBTW provider is actually shown on the event log. And the example, one example of that is the process ID. So there are providers on the event logs, there are things that show on the event logs which omits the process ID information. And that is the case of, I think it was the case of DNS. I'm not completely sure, to be honest, but I remember that there were a few cases where the process ID, among other fields available on the EBTW, were omitted and not displayed and not collected on the event log. So those will be the main two things there. And also the fact that there are things that are not being gathered at all on the event logs. So an example of that, I think, is the networking information, the registry information, for example. So you don't get to see information on those action, those use cases on the event log itself.
So I imagine for things like the PowerShell events, we would probably replace our implementation with an ETW implementation.
That's a good question. I didn't want to go that far while presenting this, but yeah, I think at some point it will be kind of redundant to have two different ways of exposing the same information. I agree with that.
And Seth, to your earlier point, I think you said, I don't want hundreds of ETW tables. Marcos had that slide that was kind of in the additional section where he shows that there's something like 52,000 different providers. So yeah, I think obviously, obviously we won't make a table for every provider. I think that, you know, when I look at this, I'm thinking, and someone, I can't remember if it was Marcos that said this or Mike that said this, but like probably a lot of the heavy lifting is in terms of building this library component for interfacing with ETW. And then there's like a lighter lift for each table that we want to build. And that's also more where the question comes, is this something that belongs in Osquery?
Yeah, and yeah. It sounds totally reasonable in Osquery, right? Like having Windows process events sounds amazing. Having a better implementation for file events, having process events, right? These are all things that we have on other platforms. They feel like they fit well here. And then there's a long tail of, well, what about this provider? Does this fit? I don't know. What do we think? The registry is really interesting. I feel like there's probably some big questions there about, like, that probably wants a configuration surface about the same way file event monitoring is a configuration service for pre-filtering. But a lot of that feels like very provider-focused questions. And I don't think recognizing that different providers may have different requirements and feasibility and applicability does not invalidate the idea that we should be doing ETW stuff.
Good. Yeah.
So, and I'm sure that implementation-wise, there will be opinions. Likely the Trail of Bits folks probably have architectural thoughts on what that looks like.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
I'm not really a Windows expert, but it would be interesting if we could create a couple of blueprints issues we can, better inspect and talk about.
I would even suggest maybe a draft PR, just because might work as a better centerpiece for the discussion than a lot of ambiguity and open questions and unanswered stuff. I don't want like a bunch of doubting to prevent a first step, but I would tell you that it should expect some feedback.
My feeling is a draft PR. Like what would you say in a draft PR? Let's look at ETW. It'll look kind of like it looks on this slide, and we'd all go like, okay.
I'm saying actually collecting.
No, excuse
something.
me. Blueprint. I don't think a blueprint.
Yeah, blueprint.
would
Yeah,
add
exactly.
much.
So the blueprints function as a way to get to get some buy-in. I think you're already there. You got some buy-in. So there's been previous what do they call it? Precedent has been set, right? We have these other tables, starting with one that merely provides parity on Windows is non-debatable. I think you should go straight ahead to a draft PR for something like that, if it illustrates the plan on how to implement the ETW publisher component. And that low-level feedback is, I think, where we want to get to sooner rather than later. Yeah.
What tables do you want to start with?
I will start with the process table, and then probably jump into tracking files and network connections, maybe. Yeah, process table is a kind of I mean, it's probably not the easiest one.
So we have process tables already. You are adding parity. I think that there is broad support for process and file tables. Do we have network event tables? How do we feel about that one? I feel like it might.
I think
Yeah, we have socket events on Linux.
You have the sockets. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's the same then. It's a little bit more privacy impacting than the other ones, but we already have it, so okay. There you go. Those three sound okay. They're parity with the existing things we have.
Yeah, I think feature parity will be a good start.
No, it's really cool.
In the chat here, I linked to issue 7020. I think somebody had like implementations kind of. So there was originally Nick Anderson did some implementation, and then this other person built on that to get a little bit further. So I thought
7020 was about power sysmon, which like uses some other.
It's called the issue is titled that, but to get into the description, it's about how to implement sysmon parity or functionality like sysmon. Sysmon being partially, ETW driven. So it says like, doesn't everybody want sysmon? Yeah, we do. But could we get it with ETW? And then some of the discussion there is about how you could. So it's relevant to this, but I think there might be some code to look at too.
Yeah, I kind of looked into that code, and also I followed the discussion of that issue. So basically, the main problem of not moving forward with that issue was the fact that you end up requiring a third-party component to be installed in order for this logic to be,
that's my memory.
the guy that implemented the code, the PR, and that's listening because Sysmon captured this the data that is exposed through different means. They deploy a kernel driver. They also use ETW and some other ways to retrieve this information, and then end up publishing this information through ETW. So they change that PR ends up listening for those for that ETW channel coming from that ETW provider, which is implemented by Sysmon, and then just consume that data and use it through different event tables. So that was the main idea of that PR. But I think at some point there were people suggesting of just using ETW, which to retrieve that data, so that limitation of having to have a Sysmon on the endpoint is not there. So
yeah, okay. Well, there's open issues that we will probably close and favor a new initiative, so we can clean up some of the false starts and get behind the new one.
Sounds great. I got nothing else to say.
When can you start?
So we'll be working on that on our end, but glad to hear that there's generally buy-in here to bring this stuff into Osquery. Thank you, Marcos, for putting all that
Yeah.
together. I think it was really
Thank-
helpful to
thank you, guys.
have all of that context when looking into this.
Yeah, it's a complex topic, so yeah, we're going to have it on the deck. Thank you guys for your time. I'm going to be sharing the deck so everyone can have it. And yeah, thanks again for your time here.
Sure. If you toss it into the office hours Slack or something, I'll link to it in the office
Okay.
hours.
Yeah.
Minutes.
Good.
That's the last agenda item.
I guess I have a small thing.
Sure.
I have a PR to add C group paths to the processes table on Linux. I think I've done most of the reviews. I still have something from directionless.
That's
Not
me.
sure. Okay. Wait, sorry, who was that? I didn't see.
Seth.
Okay, cool. About the amount of time spent, because this is just more things that are going to have to be done every time you scan through the processes table.
Mhm.
And because it's out of proc, it's going to be 3 syscalls for every process, which could add like like 1 or 2 microseconds per process.
So my worry here is
Before
that
we start, I left some data on it as a reply to your comment.
Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I had way too many string copies before, which was not great for performance because of mmap. Yeah, I mean, this does bring in the bigger concern of if we start having a lot of columns and tables, we're going to be spending a lot of time getting data that people are not requesting. And that would probably be most cleanly done with some sort of lazy execution, but that would be a lot of work in the back end.
So there's a couple of things we've done inside Osquery, I think. Maybe I've only done them in Launcher. I don't remember. One of them is you can have sort of a hidden column that like controls whether or not you fetch this. That's kind of weirdly roundabout, right? Select star from process where it includes C group equals true, right? It's kind of stupid, but
yeah,
sometimes we've done it. I don't remember, we've talked about in the past the idea of having hidden columns that we didn't populate unless they were in the select block. But I think SQLite doesn't support that.
Yeah.
I think we've talked, like, I think Teddy brought up the idea of maybe flagging that up to the SQLite Foundation. But I don't know if anyone else remembers these details.
I think we also had support for it.
Yeah, I see there is code. I think in the process table in the macOS, on the macOS side, we do check if we have the column being requested.
Oh, well, then that might be a good answer for performance and like sort of that, right? Flag the column as hidden and then only populate it if it's in the select block.
Okay.
How do other people feel about that for this data?
I don't think it is a huge overhead. If you look at the number, it is just a plus 8%. And this is just really a rough test based on the .timer on functionality on Osquery. And I'm talking about 21,000 processes. So it doesn't look like a huge overhead, honestly.
8% sounds like a lot.
But it was like maybe half a second more or less on, well, more on the case where I'm not gathering them. But on 20,000 processes, that seems really.
I don't know. Like, I know there are people who run Osquery on fairly hefty Linux servers. Some of our customer base does that.
I mean, yeah, if you're running it on, I guess if you're running on a container host, then at that point you're probably gonna want the C group. But like that you could easily get to like many tens of thousands of processes there.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I'm not sure is doesn't the watchdog ends up using this table, right? It follows this code path.
Yeah, but it only queries a single process queries, so it's the
Well, where does the filtering
really fast.
happen though?
On wait, okay, yeah, sorry. On the process name. No, wait, on the PID, sorry, the watchdog has the PID for the worker. So the PID is instant because it access the single entry under the procfs file system.
Is that still true with your you've got a PR up to track CPU utilization that I thought was based on process name?
No, it's not based on process name, and that's slightly like that's a different service that runs and you can enable or not. But then, and yeah, by default gathers CPU usage for all processes. But then you can say that you want to only see the CPU usage of the worker,
right?
And that again uses the PID to.
Okay, but by default that.
But it doesn't even use the table.
It's not using
APIs.
the table.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is why I'm like, this is why I'm just like, I don't know. I get real nervous if we're like, well, we only had 10%.
Yeah, and if I add if I add namespaces to this, that's another 10%. So. Yeah.
Are we? I mean, do folks have a sense of like, are we talking about 10% of something that people would consider a trivial impact typically on their systems, like a select against the process?
Half a second. Half a second sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah. I am kind of annoyed that the read file syscall never went anywhere, because that would probably like basically third our impact.
Is that work we can do, or is that like
no? It's a kernel question. And because the problem is that now that there's all these like Spectre mitigations, doing a syscall is hard, and we're doing 3 syscalls for something that practically should only take 1, but there's no way to do it in only 1 without like IOU ring, which is still quite annoying.
I mean, the hidden column and only generated if it's selected sounds like a pretty good option to me.
Where does the macOS process table do that?
I remember looking at it. Let me try to find it.
Is column? See, is
column used or
any column used?
Is any column?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I can do that.
I don't have any better suggestions. I worry about performance impact of stuff like this.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
I feel like some of our tables we know are really slow unavoidably, and that's just the reality. And other ones, I think the expectation is that they should be very fast. So I kind of want to keep that in mind.
So there are some additional details I omitted. The first one is that I tested this on Fedora, where compared to Ubuntu, I noticed that all processes always have at least the / as a C group path. So the overhead here on Fedora could be higher compared to Ubuntu. And the other thing is that I think we can still avoid 1 memory copy. And I don't know how bad the read file function you're using is. Like, I know it's not pretty. We discussed about it several times already. It's quite complex. I don't know how much overhead it has. I've not profiled this. One thing we could do is we could ditch the read file function we have in core and just read the file directly.
It seems like
sorry, go ahead.
I decided to keep that copy because it seems like the row struct really wants a string and not a string view. And I'm not sure how I could get a string without a copy from if I want to cut off something at the beginning. It's pretty easy if you want to cut off the end, but not at the beginning.
Yeah, on the note, I think we can maybe buy also some time. There are other places in the Linux processes table which is using the Osquery split function, which in the end calls the boost split, and basically, so there are copies there, and we are not always actually using all the information. I think we are, if I recall right, we are using this, for instance, this status file, which is big, as quite some text. And so if we use the string view version, maybe we are able to speed it up a little, avoiding some copies and copying only what we need.
Yeah, I mean, I originally used boost split, but it's
yeah, I mean,
it didn't do what I wanted, so I end up just using find.
Yeah, exactly. In your case, was I think definitely was correct. That was a substring, but
yeah.
I mean, in all cases, to be fair, if you're not using all the data, the split is just maybe easy to think about, but easier to think about. But technically, you would want to select each specific field only. But again, yeah, I think if we eventually can change the split we are doing by doing copies in other places in that Linux process table, maybe we can save some other time and offset the cost if we are really concerned about adding this. Like, I think there are other performance improvements that can be done on that table.
Is there a downside to the hidden column approach?
Don't think so. I mean,
it's
discoverability, but maybe. But yeah.
I know that it's just a bit more code, and I guess a bit more comparisons in cases where you'd want to. Yeah, it's not really going to matter. The incorrect branch prediction is going to be like 10 instructions, so it doesn't really matter. Or 10 cycles. It's not 10 instructions.
And I mean, I think the biggest downside to me is maybe in terms of user experience. Like, people, personally, when I use Osquery, I am like, oh, I wonder what this table does. Select star from processes limit 3. And if I don't see the C group column there, then I maybe don't know that it's there.
Yeah.
That's why we have .schema. No, I know. I just mentioned, but yeah, that's why we have .schema name of the table where you can print. But yeah,
I'm gonna try out is column used, which seems to be the cleanest way of doing it because there's no like weird enable this column.
Maybe cool. Apart from all the criticisms, thanks for the work. It looks great.
Yeah, I have not done this much Osquery stuff in a while, so it's good to know what expectations you have for this.
Yeah, I think it's a great feature. I was also going to ask whether in a feature progress it is possible to write a SQL function that we can use to parse the C group path and do pattern matching and extract the container name.
Extracting container name?
Yeah.
That is a bit of a problem because every runtime is going to be a bit different. I was going to do more work in the future about finding a way of mapping C groups to containers. But this isn't like some trivial, just read out of the text thing. Like Podman, for example, the container names tend to be like a UUID. In the C group name has a UUID in it or something like that. Systemd containers are a bit different. LXD containers are different. Probably like run C is different from all those. So it's going to require some specific work.
Yeah, the way I was thinking about this was we should have some separators around the container name, even though we do not know what it is exactly. But they should always start with a common prefix. Like with pod, it is libpod dash, and Docker
Yeah,
it is Docker
okay,
dash.
That makes
And
sense.
Kubernetes, I think it is K8s dash something.
Okay. Yeah. I have not tried Kubernetes yet with this. I need to do that. Just have not set up mini KDS or whatever it is yet.
Also, yeah, the pull request looks good for me. But yeah, if we're talking about adding a hidden column, yeah, I guess we'll wait.
Yeah,
to merge it.
I mean, do that like right now.
I mean, I could be convinced that it's fine too. It's not a hard block. I just always want to kind of raise it and be cognizant of these things.
I think it's a good idea to get in the habit of doing this more. Just as these tables just blow up, I think a lot more. It shouldn't just be like just C group path uses it. It should be a lot of stuff that uses it.
I feel like I think about performance, right? Is any couple of percent is fine, and eventually,
Yeah,
it's too much. So, we are over time, and that's all of our agenda items.
Okay.
Anyone else want to say anything? If not, thank you all for your time and contributions, brightness, and energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
See you next time.
yeah, we'll call it. See you next time.
Thank
See
you,
you guys.
everyone.
Fun.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you.